Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and I am streaming live from my office, actually, at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy. And I'm super excited to have you guys on today. Laura, who's been on our podcast before, talking about the LYT method, which is she's a physical therapist and yoga instructor. And she talked about some simple things to do for exercises. And she had an unexpected emergency, so she's going to reschedule. So stay tuned for that. But ultimately, I just want to discuss how, we don't need to make health complicated. In fact, the more complicated we make it, probably the worse we'll feel. And the more complicated we make it, probably the less compliant we'll be with trying to make it so complicated, and stressing about the details. So if you follow us on our podcast, Jen and I talk all the time about the 3 simple things to keep us healthy. And if you focus on these things in general, you will be a healthy person. So, and that is sleep, diet, and exercise. And in that order. Most people, when they see a healthy person, they look at them and they think, wow, that man or woman must exercise a lot. I wonder how many days a week they go to the gym. Well, the fact of the matter is that most people probably spend less, even super healthy people that are fit and buff spend less than 5 hours in the gym a week. It doesn't take a lot of time to get results in the gym. Now, if you're an athlete that is an endurance athlete, especially if you're a bike rider like myself, then you're going to be spending more time exercising just because that's the nature of bike riding. It takes longer to get the proper adaptations than it would with other things, even in running. Runners don't really have to spend that much time running, but bikers do because of the nature of biking. So you don't have to spend a bunch of time in the gym. And here's the thing, you don't need to go to the gym. You don't need to make it complicated. Seriously, body weight stuff is very, very effective. So do body weight squats, 10 of those at a time, and then work up to whatever you can. Add a jump, do some plyometrics. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can do that you can even do that at work. And if you don't do it for very long, you're not even going to start sweating. So, and speaking of that, at work, you don't have to set a time to go to the gym. I got to go to the gym at 6 a.m. every morning, at 6 o'clock or whatever. Because sometimes that's a barrier, or it is a barrier. There's no doubt about it that that's a barrier. So you can do short exercises throughout the day. Like I said, body weight squats throughout the day. Do some jumping squats. Walk around the block on your breaks at work. Just add some time in there, and those things add up. It's really simple stuff that really adds up. So what about food then? We want to make the food thing so complicated and maximize your protein and track your macros and track your calories. And I'm not saying that those things can't be of benefit, but think about 100, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. Did our ancestors track their calories? No. Did they track their macros? No. Did they look at a piece of meat and say, I wonder how much fat that has in it? I wonder how much protein that has in it? Absolutely not. They did not do that. They just ate good, real food. So some of the simple techniques that Jan and I talk about on our podcast to make it simple for eating is, if it doesn't rot, don't eat it. In general, that's a pretty good idea. Because think about it. If bacteria and fungus won't grow on it and eat it, then maybe we shouldn't either. And think about, how is it going to get assimilated into our gut if bacteria can't even break it down? So it doesn't rot, don't eat it. And in general, if you go with it doesn't rot, don't eat it, you will probably be fairly healthy. And I mentioned exercise is not the most important part of staying healthy. I mentioned that, but I will tell you that, so diet is more important than exercise. When I see somebody and they go to the gym a lot, they say they exercise a lot. It's like, what? But they're overweight and they don't know why they're overweight. I go to the gym, 4 times a week. It's like, well, it's your diet. What are you eating? And the facts of the matter are, you cannot exercise your way out of a bad diet. It is impossible. I've tried to do it. It is absolutely impossible to exercise your way out of a bad diet, especially as you get older. Now, I will tell you, it's easier when you're younger, and it's easier if you do lots of cardio. And I'm not necessarily recommending that. It's better to have a good diet and do cardio. I am a big believer in cardio, as much as people don't like it. They don't like it because it's hard. Hard, intense cardio is difficult. There's no doubt about it. So I mentioned sleep, and the people that like to brag about how little sleep they get. Well, good for them. They're going to die young, and they're not going to be healthy. The facts of the matter is that we will die without sleep before we'll die without food. That's true. We go into, our brains kind of shut down and go into psychosis after about 3 days without sleep. But we can survive for up to 3 weeks without food. I mean, we are good at storing energy. That's why we store fat around our waist, because we are good at storing energy. So most of us will die without sleep. We will die without sleep before we'll die without food. So that's why it's important to maximize sleep. You will not be healthy if you don't sleep appropriately. And let's talk about that as far as when should you sleep. Humans are diurnal creatures. You've heard of nocturnal. Nocturnal is like animals that hunt at night, animals that are more active during the night. And humans are diurnal. That means we are meant to work during the day and we're meant to sleep at night. So we are not nocturnal, and it will definitely age us, and we will not be as healthy if we don't sleep at night. And I believe in getting at least 8 hours of sleep at night. And the most important thing is to try to go to sleep at the same time, get up at the same time. Even on weekends, when you're not working, even when you're not on a set schedule, try to get up at the same time and try to go to bed at the same time. Some people try to make it complicated. You'll hear these people, and they usually live in the South or near the equator. And they're these fitness experts that say, well, you should get up with the sun and go to bed with the sun. Well, if you live in northern latitudes where I do, that means you'll be getting up at 3:30 in the morning and you'll be going to bed at 10:30 at night. And that's not okay. So, you have to be reasonable about it and just try to get 8 hours of sleep a night. Also, on the flip side, that means you go to bed at 4:30 at night in the winter and get up at 8 o'clock in the morning in the winter. So we can't, because of how humans have migrated away from the equator, and we can't always go by the sun when it comes to timing our sleep. So but sleep, diet, and exercise. And before you try anything else, as far as all the biohacking techniques, which there's a lot of them out there, including supplements. And my wife and I are both pharmacists, and we sell supplements in our pharmacy. But we are honest with people. Supplements are meant just for that. They're meant to supplement your way out. They're meant to supplement a good, healthy lifestyle already. You can't have a crappy lifestyle and just take supplements and think that you're going to be healthy. You have to be really honest and realistic about that. And of course, in our pharmacy, our number one thing we do, Janet and I are experts in hormone replacement, and we're a big believer in hormone replacement for long-term health, especially to help prevent disease and treat certain diseases. When you look at some of the things that hormones are good for, whether it be bone density, whether it be our cardiovascular health, whether it be our brain health, whether it be increase muscle mass, whether it be to prevent urinary tract infections in women, to prevent urinary incontinence in men and women. You look at that, and there's a drug for all of those things. And if you follow us enough, you realize that Janet and I are two pharmacists that don't believe in drugs to treat most chronic disease. Most chronic disease lacks something else. You're lacking something in your diet, you're lacking something as far as movement, or you're lacking hormones. So hormones are a good way to optimize your health also while you're focusing on sleep, diet, and exercise. So let's talk about some things that are big mistakes usually when it comes to people's diets. I would say smoothies. Smoothies is the biggest one. I wouldn't say the biggest one, but it's the biggest one that people think they're doing something healthy and they're not. When I'm counseling people and I'm like, and they're having problems losing weight, especially women. Well, I eat healthy. Well, tell me what a typical day is like. Well, I wake up and I have a breakfast smoothie. Well, what do you put in your breakfast smoothie? Well, it's all healthy stuff. I put chia seeds in there. I put a scoop of protein powder. I put some Greek yogurt. I put a scoop of peanut butter, and I put an apple, and I put a banana. And I'm like, you know what? You're already up to 600 calories in this smoothie, and you're drinking it. Imagine trying to eat all that stuff. Would you eat an apple and a banana and all that other stuff? No, you probably wouldn't. But it's easy to drink our calories. So one of the mistakes most people make is they think they're eating healthy by eating smoothies, and smoothies are just a way to make to where you can concentrate a bunch of calories into a drink and drink what you probably would never eat, because it's more difficult when you're eating the whole food than it is when you're drinking it. So, and that goes for this goes without saying, but also just drinking your calories, period. Drinking soda, drinking Monster energy drinks or energy drinks, drinking alcohol. It's really, really easy for those calories to add up when you're drinking them. And not only that, but with alcohol, when you start drinking alcohol, you'll start making bad food choices too. So is usually the key. So another thing is there's so much talk now about maximize your protein. So I saw a thing the other day, and if you follow me on Facebook and Instagram, I posted on Instagram and Facebook about Cheerios, the breakfast cereal. It's got a sign on it now that says protein. I don't think it says high protein. I think it just says protein. So they're basically talking about Cheerios being a good protein source. So not only is cereal junk food, but it's not a good protein source. Okay. And people think just because something says high protein that it's good for you. One of the things that bothers me the most is protein drinks and protein bars. And people think they're doing something healthy because they're eating these things or drinking these things. And if it's in a package like that, it is junk food. And I'm not saying I don't partake in it, because there's times where in a pinch, I will eat a protein bar. Is it better than a Snickers bar? Honestly, I'm gonna say probably not. Some of them have less sugar. If you stick to the ones with just mostly protein. But if something is cookies and cream flavored, vanilla flavored, or something like that, it's junk food, right? I mean, that's just a fact of the matter. I don't care how much protein it has or not. You'll be better off eating real food when you can. So, have cheese, have a beef stick, something like that, instead of going for the protein bar, which has a lot more sugar in it. So, let's see. As far as health hacks, there are none. There really are none. You got to keep it simple, and some results will come right away, but it can take up to 2 years for your body to completely remodel and get used to all the new activity that you have. If you start losing weight and start exercising, it might take up to 2 years for your body to completely change to where it was before. So realize that. some of the results will come right away. Also realize that, weight is not the most important thing. And some people live and die by the scale. And I will tell you, I'm one of them. I probably work too much on my weight, but it is a tool to help guide our health plan. There's no doubt about it. But realize that the more important thing is lean body mass and not necessarily weight. It's less fat, more muscle mass. So there's a lot of people with high muscle mass. I'm one of them, for instance. Like if you look at BMI, body mass index, it's basically a height and a weight ratio to show if you're obese or not. Well, per my BMI, I should lose at least 35 more pounds to be ideal body weight. But I'm at like 13% body fat now, and losing that much weight, I would lose a lot of muscle mass. So realize that it's muscle that's important, and lower body fat. It's not necessarily the weight on the scale. And one of the most important ways to look at that is look in a mirror. And you can see changes in the mirror when you start working out within a few weeks, honestly. So the mirror test is a good test. There are more fancy tests out there, like a DEXA scan. I've done a DEXA scan to measure my bone density, my lean body mass, and my fat mass. And it's a great tool to monitor your progress as you're trying to get healthy. So there's lots of tools out there like that. There's some other ways to test body fat. The skin caliber tests are a way, especially to test sub-Q body fat. It won't test your visceral fat inside, but sub-Q fat is the one you see. So for some people, that's the most important, although visceral fat is probably more important, because if you have visceral fat inside of you, that's the one that's most deadly. But visible is the subcutaneous fat. So that's how the skin tests work. There are some methods out there that test electrical impedance. I will tell you they might be a good relative way, like all of the methods are. Once you start with one method, keep using that method. Don't compare one method to another. But I know on the Tanita body fat machine, which I have to monitor body fat and health and weight, it underestimated my body fat by about 6% compared to the DEXA scan. So, and I've seen people take these tests and they say, well, I tested my body fat. I'm 11% body fat. And you can just tell by looking at their waist that that's just not true. So sometimes those things underestimate. Again, a mirror test is probably the best. And, if you have 10 or 11% body fat as an adult male, you're going to be a very lean person. You'll have visible abdominal muscles. You won't have a lot of fat rolling over not much anyway, fat rolling over your belt. So realize the mirror test is probably one of the best ways to verify how your body's progressing and what you look like. Also your waist size. And as you lose weight, even gain muscle mass, most of us store weight around our waist. So when we lose weight, we will and gain muscle mass, your waist will still get smaller. So let's see, what else can I say as far as mistakes when it comes to the gym? I will say this is people make it too complicated. Whether they're trying to build a home gym or whether they're trying to go to a gym, they want some kind of routine. Well, I will tell you that, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees. So look at it like this, especially if you're just getting off the couch. Your routine does not have to be very complicated. If you do want to go to the gym, and that's a priority for you, because sometimes when you try to work out at home, there can be a lot of distractions. I get that. We have a home gym, and there is a lot of distractions at home. But there are also at the gym also. Some people like going to the gym for social hour. I don't. I like to get into my workout. My workouts are almost less than a half hour all the time. I do 2, maybe 3 a week with amazing results. But I get in and do 7, 8 to 9 sets of something or different exercises, usually 2 to 3 sets of each of them, and I'm out within a half hour. It doesn't have to take a long time to go to the gym. But don't make it complicated. They say, well, what equipment should I use? How much weight should I use? Don't 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 worry about it. Just pick up a weight and start moving. Um, there are a lot of programs out there when it comes to a lot of videos now. Just YouTube, a video, and you can find out how to, a good workout program, and you'll find out good ones. I'm a big believer in kettlebells. In fact, Laura was going to be on our podcast today, and we were going to talk about kettlebells. Kettlebells are one of the best ways to almost work every muscle in your body with the kettlebell swing. So if you look up kettlebell swing, it's a great way to, and it gets because you're swinging, it gets your cardiovascular system up and your respiratory system. So it's a good cardio exercise also. But I'm a big believer in kettlebell swings. But there's so much you can do from the kettlebell swings. Laura, when she was on our podcast last time, she says add a jump. That's a great idea. So I tried that after talking to her, and I did kettlebell swings. And I added a jump afterwards. Make sure if you're doing kettlebell swings and you do that, make sure you use lighter weight so you don't get hurt. That's very important. So, but think about what our ancestors used to do when they used to work out. Did they count their steps? Did they say, well, how many steps did I do today? No. Did they, when they were swinging a hammer, did they say, well, how much weight is this hammer and how many times should I swing it? No. They just moved and they just did what it took to get their work done. So I think that's what's important. You don't need to make it too complicated. Think about what our ancestors did. Think about what our ancestors ate. It's true that our ancestors mostly, and it would depend on where they were located, would probably eat 4 to 5 different types of foods, and that's it. Eggs, bacon, steak or beef, ground beef, kind of the same thing. Dairy, so cheese, milk, yogurt. And then they might have some potatoes, which they can store year round. And some of the other ground vegetables they can store year round, like carrots and stuff, onions. But other than that, they would have fresh vegetables in season, but without refrigeration, so they don't eat those for like a month at a time, probably. So keep it simple, just like our ancestors did. Our ancestors were much healthier than we were, and they didn't have all the fancy technology that we have to try to track their calories and monitor how much movement they're doing. It's not necessary. The important thing is to move and sleep, and of course, eat real food. One way at the supermarket, Janet talks about this often. If you want to eat real food, shop the perimeter. Now, some people are going to say this because, refrigeration and stuff is on the perimeter. Yes, the bread aisle is on the perimeter too. Now, as far as donuts and cakes, probably stay away from that most of the time. I do not believe bread is bad for us. I do believe that, you need to be careful eating too much. And if you're a diabetic or pre-diabetic, I would completely stay away from it. But when you look at what our ancestors did our ancestors bake bread? Absolutely they did. And they weren't obese. Was the bread different? Sure. Possibly the flour and all that was different. I agree with that. But they weren't able to buy loaves off the shelf at an unlimited amount, basically. They had to bake their bread. And usually they baked, one loaf for a family. And, they had big families. So when that loaf was gone, it was gone. So, and they had to make a new batch. So it wasn't like they keep going back for more and more. And that's part of the problem in America is that with obesity is that most of us have almost an unlimited food supply. Our freezer, our fridge, our pantries are full of food. Most of us probably have enough food in our house to live for a year. When you look at the dried foods that we have, if you have any beans and rice and quinoa, stuff like that, that stuff keeps forever. But also, a few pounds of it goes a long ways when you cook it. So, seriously, most of us could live for months at least with the stuff that's stored in our house. And that's part of the problem. Our ancestors didn't have a way to store food because there was no refrigeration. There were preservatives as far as salt. They could store pork, and they had cellar. They would bury stuff, keep it in the ground to keep it cooler. But in general, they couldn't store a lot of fresh vegetables long term because they would rot because they didn't have refrigeration. So that's part of the problem. So how do we store our food now? We store it around our bellies. That's where we store it, and that's where all the extra fat comes from. So it's more important to, not store as much. We don't want to store it around our bellies as much as possible. And I will say this too. Try to just buy healthy food. We just try not to buy junk food in our house. Because if I had cake in my house, if I had cookies in my house, I would eat them. But if they're not there, am I going to go to the store and buy them? Absolutely not. So we just don't buy that stuff. And then the temptation goes away. And if you have real food in your house, eat the real food first. And then if you feel like a cookie, okay. If you have a cookie, but just one cookie. And that's part of the problem is we have boxes of them. And then we end up not being able to control ourselves, and we eat a box of cookies. At least that's how I would do it. So we just try not to buy that stuff, or chips. Chips are some of the worst. Who can't eat a bag full of chips? Lay's had that commercial, you can't eat just one. Yeah, that's probably true. So, just don't buy the stuff, and then you won't be tempted with it. And as far as fasting, let me just talk about that while we finish this podcast up. Think about what our ancestors did as far as eating and fasting. They fasted quite often. In fact, they would probably fast for days at a time. That's why we're good at storing fat, to prepare ourselves for those fasts. But, when they had a big hunt, they would hunt and, maybe kill something 2 or 3 times a week. Then they would eat good for a day or a couple days. And then they might fast. They might have some berries if it was in season, or some fresh vegetables or fruit if it's in season. But I'm just going to tell you, you cannot sustain yourself as a human on plants alone. You just can't. And if you don't believe me, look at what happens to humans when they don't have a source of protein, whether it be fish or animals, something like that. They die. So especially in an environment where you're trying to gather your own food, it's just impossible because they're not calorically dense enough. You have to eat pounds and pounds and pounds of them to get enough calories and nutrition in them. So why not eat the animals that have already concentrated the nutrients? It's an amazing thing that happens. So, but I believe in fasting. I try to fast. I do a 24-hour fast once a week, and I fast at least 16 hours a day, most days, depending on my workout schedule, depending on my bike racing schedule. But we're not meant to be fed all the time. And if you're having a problem with diabetes or pre-diabetes, then fast, and your blood sugar will go down. And those are just facts. And if somebody tells you that it's not reversible, then and they're a doctor, then get a new doctor, because it's definitely type 2 diabetes is definitely reversible. It is a dietary problem. Well, that about covers it for today. Stay tuned to follow us on Facebook. We have a Health Solutions podcast page. We got my personal page. Definitely follow me on Instagram too. Our Instagram has just recently blown up, over 5 million views in the last 30 days. It's basically I started doing short videos on drugs I would not recommend taking as a pharmacist. Statins are in there, birth control pills are in there, high blood pressure pill, medication, type 2 diabetes medication. I talk about all those things. So follow me on Instagram for those short reels, so you can learn about what drugs I would not recommend as a pharmacist. And I do give ways on this podcast onto how we don't need drugs to treat most long-term disease, because most long-term disease is caused by problems with sleep, diet, and exercise. Those are the facts. So keep it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. Focus on those 3 things and you will be a healthy person. So thank you for tuning in today to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday to our regularly scheduled to our midweek scheduled podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.